On July 14th, President Donald Trump hardened his stance on China as he struggles to contain the coronavirus. He signed the legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for the oppressive national security law it imposed on Hong Kong.
We withdrew from the Chinese-dominated WHO. Today I signed legislation and an executive order to hold China accountable for its oppressive actions against the people of Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Autonomy Act, which I signed this afternoon, passed unanimously through Congress. This law gives my administration powerful new tools to hold responsible the individuals and the entities involved in extinguishing Hong Kong's freedom. We've all watched what happened. Not a good situation. It was
Acting on a Tuesday deadline, Trump signed the bill approved by U.S. Congress to penalize banks doing business with Chinese officials who implement Beijing's new national security law on Hong Kong. He said he also signed an executive order aimed at furthering punishing China for what he called its oppressive actions against Hong Kong. It will end the preferential economic treatment Hong Kong has received for years. No special privileges, no special economic treatment, and no export of sensitive technologies, Trump told a news conference. Hong Kong will now be treated the same as mainland China, he said. Taken together, the actions represented a further plunging of U.S. relations with China already strained over the global pandemic, China's military buildup in the South China Sea, its treatment of Uyghur Muslims, and massive trade surpluses. According to a White House fact sheet, the executive order includes revoking special treatment for Hong Kong passport holders. The former British colony was returned to Chinese rule in 1997, with a law protecting freedoms of speech, assembly, and the press until 2047. The legislation Trump signed calls for sanctions on Chinese officials and others who help violate Hong Kong's autonomy and financial institutions that do business with those found to have participated in any crackdown on the city. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunyin said China would impose retaliatory sanctions against U.S. individuals and entities in response. She said the U.S. side's attempt to obstruct the implementation of the Hong Kong national security law will never prevail. In order to safeguard our legitimate interests, China will take the necessary response and issue sanctions against the relevant U.S. personnel and entities. We urge the U.S. to correct their errors, do not issue the so-called Hong Kong Autonomy Act, and stop interfering in China's internal affairs, including Hong Kong. If the U.S. continues with its current course of action, China will inevitably respond. A younger, more defiant generation of Hong Kong Democrats has secured the most votes in unofficial primary elections in the Chinese-ruled city, setting the stage for a battle with pro-Beijing politicians for control of the city's legislature. The 16 all but one under 30 and dressed in black T-shirts are members of a so-called localist or resistance camp, which outshone the cohort of traditional Democrats and had secured 12 candidate slots as of Wednesday, July 15, in the afternoon.
And today, 16 candidates from the protest camp hold the press conference. We urge and raise the possibility, hope to have dialogue and discussion with other elected candidate in the primary election belongs to the traditional pro-democratic camp.
The success of young contenders in the primaries organized by the pro-democracy camp to pick candidates for the September 6 election for a 70-seat city assembly comes amid widespread resentment of the national security law that Beijing imposed last month. Beijing denounced the vote as illegal and warned it may have violated the new security law, which has raised fears for the freedoms that have underpinned Hong Kong's open society and success as a financial hub.
After President Trump signed on the Hong Kong's Autonomy Act, which also implies how Beijing cracked down
Prominent
on Hong Kong
pro-democracy
will result in more
activist
backfire
Joshua
in
Wong
the global
won
community.
his district, but
Instead
he
of
has been
putting Hong
disqualified
Kongers'
from
lives
previous
and our
elections
safety in
and could
risk,
face
it's
similar
time
hurdles
to
this
recognize
time.
how they broke the
Wong
promise of the
warned against any
Sino-British joint
sweeping
declaration.
disqualification of
Eroding the
candidates
freedom of
during a
Hong
news
Kong should not be the way
conference
out.
with 15
Otherwise,
other
more
young
and more
politicians.
action might be
Full
taken
results are
by
expected
other
later in
global
the day.
community or world leaders in the future.
即使我哋可能未有一個權利去投票，或者我哋年紀尚輕，但亦都係因為正我哋係香港嘅未來就屬於我哋，所以我哋一班年青人先至會願意去有機會犧牲未來都要企出嚟去反抗。咁所以我唔認為其實即係年紀會係一個嘅阻礙，而同時間反而亦都代表住我哋係為我哋自己係爭取緊我哋一個屬於我哋香港人嘅未來。
都派喺今次嘅成績咧係不錯，選民授權我哋以本土理念同埋我哋嘅。
A Hong Kong student studying in Sydney said on July 15th that although he was grateful for the Australian government's safe haven offers, he was hopeful more help would be provided for protesters in the Chinese territory. Dennis Chan, who attends university in New South Wales and is a spokesman for community group Australia-Hong Kong Link, said he was still considering whether it's safe for him to return to his homeland. Australia said last week it was suspending its extradition treaty with Hong Kong in response to a new security law imposed there and announced measures to attract businesses from the Asian financial hub, provoking an angry response from Beijing. Prime Minister Scott Morrison said that students, graduates, and workers in Australia on temporary visas will have the opportunity to stay and work for an extra 5 years and apply for permanent residency after that time.
It's really not enough to save those people who are currently in Australia. And for the concept of safe haven, there's a lot of people who really need help and they're still in Hong Kong.
After the implementation of national security law, there are plenty of countries, including the UK, Germany. They had a speech on the UN and openly opposed the national security law. And there are several countries in that list which are having an extradition treaty with Hong Kong. So my point is, when Hong Kong there is no rule of law and people bringing there will possibly submit it to the indictment of national security law, then we should review that relationship. And actually, Canada, the US, Australia, they have all said that they will suspend it or cancel it. So I think the UK, I know, is still considering it, and I hope that this could happen also with the UK
Hong
government.
Kong pro-democracy activist Nathan Law said on July 15th he feels safe in London at the moment, but described the extraterritorial reach of national security laws imposed by China as scary and urged Britain to do more to help. Law, a former legislator, left Hong Kong earlier this month after China imposed the new national security law on the territory that has been heavily criticized by the West. He said he had agreed with fellow senior activists to come to London, where allies and a large diaspora would help keep an international voice for their protests against Beijing. When asked about the reach of the new security laws in Hong Kong, Law said it covered foreigners and their actions outside Hong Kong. That is scary, he told British lawmakers in a webinar. He urged Britain to follow other countries and review its extradition arrangements with its former colony. Britain says the national security law breaches agreements made before the handover, and that China is crushing the freedoms that have helped make Hong Kong one of the world's biggest financial hubs. Hong Kong and Beijing officials have said the law is vital to plug holes in national security defenses exposed by the protests. China has repeatedly told Western powers to stop meddling in Hong Kong affairs.
Extremely concerned about the future of Hong Kong, particularly with the adoption of the national security law. But I think we're also at a moment where, it's only been adopted, less than 2 weeks ago. And
the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Opinion and Expression said on July 13th he was extremely concerned about the future of Hong Kong following the adoption of a new national security law.
the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, still applies in Hong Kong, even though China has not ratified the ICCPR.
He said, although China has not ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, human rights mechanisms still need to be active in Hong Kong. The new national security law punishes secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces with up to life in prison, and allows mainland Chinese security agents to operate officially in Hong Kong for the first time.